Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. Why is dating advice so confusing? A recent study found that more than half of young adults feel confused about choosing a life partner. And over a decade ago, Christian Mingle actually ran a survey that found 69% of singles admitted they couldn't even tell if they were on a date or just hanging out. And that's where things are at today. Surrounded by experts, influencers, viral life hacks, yet men and women are more overwhelmed than ever.
TikTok, Instagram, podcasts, pastors, your married friends, every voice is saying something different. One tells you to be authentic, another says play hard to get. Someone says ditch the apps. Someone else swears apps are the only way to meet people. It's enough to make you want to give up. So, today we're going to unpack this confusion and how to cut through the noise.
And don't forget to subscribe to the show and share it with friends, because changing dating culture starts with changing the conversation. All right, Andrew, I'm really excited about today's topic. Where are we starting?
So let's start with why dating advice can be so confusing. You know, now there are so many voices out there offering even more opinions. And oftentimes they can actually be contradictory. What one person might say might work in your case or might not. And then you might hear something that actually doesn't work for you, but it could actually work for somebody else.
Platforms like TikTok and Instagram, they're flooded with creators. And there's this crazy stat that found that 46% of people experienced relationship struggles and 23% even broke up after following TikTok dating advice.
Which in and of itself is a concerning statistic.
But it's the place where people are going for advice.
Yes. So what happens over the long haul as someone consumes a bunch of relationship advice, you end up with people online posting comments. We found a few here. For example, you'll have people saying things like, people tell you to focus on yourself, but then you have others who say, put yourself out there. Or people have said stuff like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Someone else said, stop using apps, but don't approach women in public. That's creepy. Be emotionally vulnerable, but not too much.
And that's one of the challenges of spending hours a day on social media, is that you're going to have all these different inputs from a whole bunch of unverified sources. And now it's on the individual to try to source out which pieces of advice are helpful. And naturally, when you begin to read comments like that or watch the many videos of people describing their dating experience, and let's be honest, few people are putting out positive dating experience videos online, you naturally are going to adopt some of these beliefs and maybe even behaviors. I know that before we started the podcast, I don't think I ever saw a video about dating and relationships, and I didn't know much about the dating scene more generally. And then as we started the podcast, I wanted to get more informed, began following some accounts, and now that's primarily what I see. And I'll tell you right now, it's depressing. The amount of videos and content that are out there from people who've had terrible experiences or who have terrible worldviews or who are just terrible people, it's abundant.
There is so much dating advice out there, and so much of it can be contradictory. For example, first you'll hear, don't approach women in public, they don't like it. Then you'll hear, you have to approach women in public. That's the only way you're going to meet someone. Or how about online dating is awful? But then you'll hear, online dating provides you with so many other options. Try this new app.
And speaking of dating apps, while many people may not like them, Forbes actually released a survey that discovered that nearly half of Americans believe that is the best place to find a romantic partner. And you're absolutely right. There's so much contradictory advice. And so as a man trying to navigate the modern dating landscape, you might be going online unintentionally looking for advice, or maybe you are actively looking for advice. And depending upon what source you're listening to, you're going to hear one thing. And if you try that thing, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But then in the same session where you're scrolling, guess what you're going to hear? You're going to hear the exact opposite. There's two more that we wrote down here. Things like, focus on building yourself, but then someone else will say, if you don't ask people out, nothing will happen. Don't be so focused on yourself. Focus on other people. Or be authentic, just be yourself. I've heard that one online many a time. Or you'll hear people say, don't come across as too intense, too serious, or too intentional. So actually don't be yourself, because initially when first meeting, being yourself is not the thing that people are gonna be attracted to. And so what do you do as a man trying to navigate the dating landscape in a way that is going to help you, authentically connect with a woman so that you can pursue a romantic relationship with her?
And I think what's lost here for so many people is that more choices actually don't bring about better outcomes. There's this thing known as the paradox of choice, or sometimes I've heard of it as the tyranny of abundance, that actually the more choices we have, the poorer the outcomes are once we finally make a choice.
And there are many studies that have proven time and again that particularly for men, dating apps are not a place where they will find success by and large. Dating apps really only benefit the top 1, 2, 3% of all men who are on dating apps. And so if you don't fall into that category, essentially it's just a waste of time and energy. Doesn't mean that there are not outliers. Of course there are. There always will be. But that is not the standard experience for the vast majority of men. And they might think, well, this is exciting. I've got a limited, pool of women in my community to choose from. If I get online, on 2, 3, 4, 5 different dating apps, now I've got, 10,000 women to choose from. And the reality is you probably have just as limited a pool or more so online as you do in your own community.
And this will sound contradictory, but for a young guy wanting to pursue a woman well or wanting to date better, the answer to that actually isn't to take in more information. He needs to take in information, but needs to be strategic about what information that is.
One of the things that I know single men tend to do is spend way too much time online. And I can see the benefits maybe of social media to some extent, but by and large, it's destructive to men, to women, to children, to society as a whole. But we have to acknowledge the world we live in. Men are on social media. They are consuming content at a rapid rate. And if you as a man do not understand that the algorithm does not care about you, it does not care about your success, it does not care about your happiness or fulfillment or purpose, you are the commodity. You are the thing the social media platform is selling to advertisers. So it is in the social media platform's best interest to keep you endlessly scrolling and wasting hours of time watching purposeless content.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that social media is not going to feed you what's actually helpful. It's not going to show you content that is actually useful to you. It's going to show you stuff that it thinks you'll watch. And those two things aren't necessarily aligned.
And what's crazy is the algorithm at this point, I know I like to use Instagram, and I see maybe, 5% of the people I actually follow. And it's not like I follow a lot of people. I follow 300 some people. They're all people I know personally. People I'm in relationship with. And I see like maybe 5% of them in my feed. And the rest of it is random content. And you know what's crazy is if you pause for a moment and actually consume the content, you haven't clicked in, you haven't followed, you've done nothing like that. The algorithm somehow knows you've paused and spent extra time there. And now the next time I go into my feed, I'm going to see more of that content. So needless to say, my feed is filled with, dating advice videos, which gives me a unique insight into a very broken world.
And men need to realize that whether they are intentionally pursuing this advice or simply consuming social media, that is going to be there, and that content is going to shape them whether they realize it or not.
And depending upon who's providing that content, right? Their worldview, whether they're a man or woman of faith, whether they're a man or a woman, it's going to differ. And it's amazing how, even within the Christian circle, right, you're going to hear contrasting things based upon worldview or theological beliefs.
Yeah.
And so just because you're following a Christian for wisdom, counsel, and advice, just because you follow the Ardent Pursuit podcast doesn't mean you've got all the correct answers. Now, I think we're doing our very best to provide correct, helpful, biblically based answers, but it's not guaranteed. And that's why it's so important for men to be grounded themselves apart from any platform or influencer or, dating coach, for them to be grounded in what they believe. And if they're a man of faith, to be grounded in the Word of God and to be submitted to pastoral authority, because otherwise they'll just be tossed to and fro by the different pieces of advice you're going to find online.
And something that men need to realize when they are consuming this content is that generic advice doesn't fit universally. Something that's going to work for them, it's not going to work for somebody else, and vice versa. So how does a guy actually make sense of what he is consuming?
That's a great question, and something that every man has to navigate and figure out for himself. Yes, men need to get advice, but their goal shouldn't be to try to find the advice that they want to hear, but the advice that will actually help guide them to be successful, even if it's something that they don't want to hear. For instance, if you're the 6 foot tall, good looking, Jesus loving, great personality, fit, $100,000 a year, Ken doll smile kind of guy, generic advice will help you no matter what you do. Why? Because you're kind of in that 1% of men. You don't even need the advice, but if you apply it, you're going to be successful. Now, if you're the 5'5" tall guy, little awkward, loves Jesus, maybe makes $40,000 a year, out of shape, doesn't do a great job at connecting with people in a social setting, the same advice that's given to the first guy who may find success may not be the advice that helps you find success. Why? Because generic advice like, just go talk to her. Well, for the first guy, he just walks up to the lady and says, hey, and it works. But for the second guy, he might walk up and say it or just present himself in a way that's a little awkward. And so if he says, hey, she might reject him. And so men have to figure out, okay, generic advice, that's a good place to start, but that can't be the total sum of the advice that I'm receiving from me.
And a problem that quickly arises for guys is if they're hearing contradictory advice, or if they're simply just consuming too much advice, then the answer would be more picky, right? Pick and choose what you listen to.
Yeah.
Well, then the question is, what do I listen to? And what guys can often do as a first step is that they'll pick advice that sounds interesting, or that immediately applies to their life, or it's something that they want to hear, or it's something that sounds reasonable. But the problem is, too often, guys don't need to necessarily hear what they want to hear or what sounds good. Guys need to be putting themselves under advice that's actually solid, that's actually helpful. And sometimes what's helpful and needed for a guy isn't necessarily what he wants to hear or what he would naturally pursue.
And tailoring advice to your specific needs, that's normal and healthy. To be like, well, I should just be able to do what that other guy does and it should work for me. It's like, well, you're two different people with two different gift sets, with two different personalities, with two different backgrounds, with two different looks. What works for one guy may not work for you. Of course, there are general wisdom principles that can be applied, of course, but then you've got to translate those wisdom principles into your specific situation.
What might seem like contradictory advice for different men is just advice that works for some guys and doesn't work for others. And so a guy needs to really filter what he's taking in through what are my struggles, what are my challenges, what are my strengths, what's unique about my circumstance, and use that to pursue and find advice that will be helpful and work for him.
So the question becomes, what should men do in light of all this contradictory advice, in light of just the confusing landscape of advice from dating coaches, experts, etc.?
To start, guys should stop paying attention to, let's call it 95% of relationship advice that they're taking in.
They should absolutely unsubscribe from most of those accounts, podcasts, and people that they're following. I mean, not us, but the others.
Everything else.
Yes.
Now, that's what to do to get rid of stuff. Now, a guy should purpose to find, say, 2 to 3 men who are older than him, ideally in his community. There are great guys online, but let's focus on finding men in your real world, men that you can meet with face to face, interact with in person. Find men who are older, wiser, who ideally know you, and start there. Go to those men, and those are the guys you want to draw from.
And men need to check their assumptions, because scrolling social media infinitely, listening to all these different people offer their advice, whether or not you're aware of it, you can begin to adopt some of the beliefs that they espouse. And not all of those statements are true. So you can begin to assume certain things about the dating world, about other people that aren't actually helpful or healthy. So things like, if I improve myself enough, the right woman will just appear. Women want someone rich, tall, or hyper successful. If she's interested, she'll make it obvious. Being nice should be enough to attract someone. If I follow the right script, I'll get the girl. If I show interest too soon, I'll look desperate. Once I'm in a relationship, everything else in life will fall into place. Women have it easier in dating than men. These are just a few of the beliefs and assumptions that you can begin to adopt in your own life, and that will be unhelpful. So men need to just check their assumptions regarding all things relationships.
And something that guys can do to help cut through the noise is to bring it all back to values. You know, your values will really help dictate how and who you date, which we touch on in episode 55.
It's true. And secular culture, and even, Christian culture, will pressure you in a certain direction. You'll hear from secular culture things like date for fun and then get out. Have sex as soon as you can. Enjoy being young, free, and date lots of people. Or perhaps in Christian culture, you may hear things like, when are you going to settle down? Everyone your age is already married with kids. When are you going to get married? Or you're such a great guy. There's a lucky lady out there for you. And while maybe not all of these statements are ill-intended, they all create an environment where, as a man, you're going to start to feel some pressure one way or the other. And it's in those moments of pressure where you can begin to compromise on your values. And so it's very important that men make decisions based upon their values, not based upon any external pressure.
And finally, guys should apply wisdom principles, not Hollywood tactics.
It's true, because so much of Hollywood, even just the way our culture views dating, it's one big unfolding drama. It's all about heightened emotion. It's all about the experience. It's about unrealistic standards that really are never being met. And then it's the ups, the downs, the fights, the crying, the slamming the doors, the being apart and then being together. But that's not healthy. That shouldn't be a normal dating relationship. And I'll tell you right now, I don't need to be married to tell you that's very dysfunctional in a marriage.
So there are a lot of wisdom principles that a guy can apply to his life, but 3 that we think are really important are intentionality, purpose, and clarity.
When it comes to pursuing a romantic relationship, these 3 things are really important to have at the forefront of your pursuit. And we actually unpack these in detail in episodes 1 through 16. So any listeners who haven't listened to those episodes, go back and do so. So let's take a quick look at intentionality here. Pursue with purpose, not passivity. It's easy to find yourself, in a situationship, stumbling into a relationship because you're not being intentional about your pursuit of her. It's one of those, what was a Christian Mingle stat that 68% of people didn't even know they were on a date. That can happen really easily because the man is not intentional at the outset of his engagement with a woman to say to her, hey, I'm interested in romantically pursuing you. Will you go on a date with me?
Yes, passivity is a word that men need to become very familiar with, but not comfortable with. Too many men are not intentional and they allow passivity to sneak in. And the problem is it's sneaky.
Yep.
And so it'll sneak into a guy's life in a lot of different areas. So on that one in particular, men need to really be intentional and be aware of where passivity might be showing itself.
And the reason why men oftentimes aren't intentional is because they refuse to communicate with clarity what their intentions are, what they're looking to do. Why? Because of passivity. It feels nice to just kind of exist in this flirty, undefined state where at any moment you can leave and you haven't committed to anything, you haven't said anything. And so if she's confused or hurt, you can blame it on her being crazy or dramatic. Guys like that. But as a man, what you should aim for is to communicate clearly, that you should bring clarity to the relationship, not confusion.
And finally, purpose. Men need to date with the end in mind. Am I moving toward a place where I can make a decision about marriage, or am I moving to a place where I can respectfully back out?
And if you're going to pursue a romantic relationship, if you want a girlfriend one day, these 3 principles need to be applied in your romantic pursuit. And whether you're the first guy from the earlier example or the second guy, doesn't matter. These 3 wisdom principles should be present in your life. They might look slightly different, but they absolutely need to be something that you're pursuing, something that you're living out. So, gentlemen, you're not crazy. Dating advice really is a noisy, confusing mess, but you don't have to stay stuck in it. We've shared, 4 practical ways to reduce that noise. You got to limit the noise, examine your assumptions, get back to values, and apply wisdom principles. The confusion isn't your fault. Social media thrives on drama, not depth. But clarity is still yours to pursue. Our goal here at The Ardent Pursuit is to equip you with the tools to pursue clarity. But it's your job to step up, reject defeatism, and actually put in the work. As always, we love having you here on the Ardent Pursuit podcast. We look forward to having you here next time.